Hi, my name is Luke Braun with Regina Public Schools, and this is my brother Joel Braun from True Wheels Bike Shop. And today we're going to show you how to disassemble your BMX.
Alright, so what you're going to want to do with your chain when you're taking it off, you're going to line up your chain tool on the rivet, and you're just going to want to spin your hex wrench. And as you're going, you just want to keep pressure on it to make sure that the rivet is popping through. And basically what you're doing, you're just pushing the rivet through the whole link until it's just coming out the other side. And you don't want to push it too far now, because if you push it too far, the piece will actually pop out the other side. And this tool is really nice because it has a gauge on it that lets you see when to stop. But basically, then you back your tool off all the way, and then you can see that the rivet is almost all the way out the other side. And then basically what'll happen, it'll just come apart, just like that.
Once you have your chain off, you can use your crescent wrench and set it to the correct size for the bolts on the back tire and start loosening those. And then the tire should slide right out.
And you're going to do the same with the front. So take your crescent wrench, and this one's actually already a little loose. So loosen that off. Loosen this one off. And then the wheel should just slide out. Okay, so now we're going to show you how to take the tube out of the tire. In order to take the tube out, you're going to want to find the valve stem and just use an object that you can deflate the tire a little bit. So then you'll start to hear the air come out. You can actually force the air out a little bit with your hand. And once it's at a good level, you'll notice that the tire kind of folds around the rim like that. That's a good sign. Then you're going to want to take your tire lever and use it as a bit of a leverage tool. So what you do, you put it underneath just the tube like that. You're going to want to pry it up. So usually you want to use two levers when you do this job, and you use one as a bit of a holder, so this one stays in place, and then you'll use your other one to rip or to get the tire off of the rim in another spot. And then you can just move down the tire as you go, and it should just pop up out of the rim like that. Alright, and now you're going to roll the tire lever around the rim, and it should, with a little luck, just come right off. And then you can actually use your hand to get it the rest of the way. And your tire's off your rim there. And then to take the tube out, you'll just slide it along the tire all the way to the valve stem. And then the valve stem, you just take out like that. Go.
Once you have your inner tube out, it's a good idea to check for any pieces of dirt or grit that could maybe cause punctures. If you do have a puncture, you can get a simple patch kit from Canadian Tire or something like that to cover up a hole. But other than that, if there's no punctures and maybe you've put some water on it and you don't see any bubbles, then it should be good to go, and you can put it back into your tire.
Okay, next you're going to want to take your seat out of your seat, or out of the down tube. So what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to take your number 6 Allen wrench, and you put it on the Allen bolt like that, and then you're just going to loosen it. And some of these old bikes, they're a little tough, but with a little luck, that'll loosen up. And then you'll take your bolt out. And sometimes these bikes are a little old, so you're going to have to work pretty hard to get the seat post out. And that's just years of water and rust in there. But basically, it finally slides out and you can see all the rust in there. And basically you're going to want to give that a good grease before you put it back in the bike, just to protect from corrosion and water getting in there and rusting the part again. Alright, the next thing we're going to show you is how to take the pedal off. And on this kind of bike, you're going to want to take your bottom bracket out by sliding it out. So the easiest thing to do is just take the left side pedal off. So on any bike, the left side is going to be reverse thread. So instead of turning to the right to tighten, you turn to the right to loosen. So you're going to take your pedal wrench and you're going to slot it on the pedal like that. And left side is reverse, so you're going to tighten it to loosen. You're going to turn to the right to loosen it. And basically, you're just going to want to keep going until that pedal comes all the way out of the arm. It should, with a little luck, if it's not too rusty, just slide out. Just like that. Now when you're taking apart your bottom bracket, the first thing to do is take your pedal off, which we've already shown you. But now what you're going to want to do, you're going to get a big crescent wrench and you're going to slide it onto this spacer here and tighten it up. Now you have to remember, on the left side of the bike, everything is reverse thread. So in order to loosen this off, we're going to want to turn to the right. So basically, you just turn like that, and on some of the bikes, it's going to be a little hard. You're just going to need a good amount of power to get that off, because it'll be on there pretty good. But basically, you just slide that off all the way past the threads. This comes off like that. Then there should be another spacer on there, and you can just slide that off with your fingers there. And then for this next part, what we need is a screwdriver and a hammer. So what you're going to want to do is get a flathead screwdriver and a hammer, and you can basically see there's two notches on either side here, and you're just going to want to put your flathead right in the notch, and you're just going to tap. And again, we're going to tap it all the way to the right, so you're going to turn it clockwise to loosen, because everything is reversed here. So when you get it good enough, you can actually just kind of slide it with your fingers there, and this will loosen. And again, it may be a little sticky at some points, but eventually it's going to loosen, and then what you'll actually see is the cartridge and the bearings that are in this little cartridge here. And this is what's going to need to be re-greased and kind of cleaned and all that good stuff before you put it all back together. So you slide this all the way past the threads, and then this will come right off. And you can take apart your bottom bracket. So here comes the little cartridge bearings. And then you're going to be able to slide it through the other way. And then on the other side, you can see when we take it out, there's the other cartridge with the bearings inside. And you can see there's a fair amount of grit in there, so this is why we always want to take it apart and clean it, give it a good cleaning and then a good re-greasing before you put it all back together. And you can also see kind of inside of the bottom bracket there's some old grease and some old grit and grime. We're going to want to clean that pretty good before we put that together as well. Alright, so when you have your tub and all your parts inside, you're going to want to use something like soap and water, or what we're going to use here is degreaser, which works really well to get all that grime off. But if you don't have degreaser, soap and water works a lot just like the degreasers. So I'm just going to spray a little on there, and you can also spray it right on your rag. But if you don't have a rag, or if you don't have degreaser, you're just going to wipe it around in the soap and water, and that works really well too. So we're basically just wanting to get all that grime and old grease and dirt out of there. And it's a fairly grimy and gritty process, but that's what they make cleaners for. So So you're just going to want to clean it right up. We'll spray a little more on here just to give it some good shine. Grab a new rag here. Just work every little ball bearing so that you get all that grit and grime out of there. So the part looks new, just like that. Alright, so the next part is re-greasing, and what we're using here is a Teflon grease. So this actually is really good for internal housing parts because this type of grease actually repels the dirt. So you're just going to put a little bit in your hand, and you want to run it over all the joints and the ball bearings here to basically make sure that these parts are going to be free moving and nothing is going to get stuck, because you want it to work like a well-oiled machine there. And you can kind of go around every little ball bearing there, give it a good greasing. Spread it all around. And there you go. Alright, so before we put all the pieces back together, what you're going to want to do is re-grease this bottom bracket because we have cleaned it already. So basically, you're just going to want to run grease all the way around, and this will protect the inside, and the ball bearings, when they move around there, they're going to be nice and free-flowing, and this will repel a bunch of the dirt and grime as well. So you just want to run it all the way around there. Make sure it's evenly spread, and then it's ready to be put back together. Alright, so we've re-greased the bearings there, and we've greased the bottom bracket. So now what you're going to want to do is put it all back together. So you're going to want to make sure that the balls face into the bottom bracket. So when you put it on, you're going to see the metal part is on the outside, and that's the side that you're going to want facing you as you put it back on. So the bearings just slide right in there, make sure they're nice and snug, and then what we do is put it back just like we took it apart. So this is that notch piece, and you're going to want to slide it on there, and it'll be a little hard to thread on at first. And remember, it's always backwards, so we're turning left here to tighten instead of right. So you're just going to want to keep going there till it's snug. And there's a lot of thread to tighten through, so it'll take a little bit of time. And when you start, the crank will feel a little loose, but as you go and as you tighten this, it should start to snug up. Go ahead. So as you're tightening up this O-ring, you don't want to tighten it right tight because you still want free moving parts in the bottom bracket. So it's kind of a touch and go kind of deal. So you want to loosen it just enough so that you have a free moving bottom bracket, but you don't want to tighten it so much that it doesn't spin freely. So we've got it at a good point right there. And basically now, what you're ready to do is put on the washers that you took off at first. So first, there's a little washer and it's got a little notch in it. So you just want to slide that notch into the corresponding part of the crank arm. And usually it's down there, and that will just slide right on. And then what you're wanting to do is put the last piece on, and remember it's reverse thread. So basically you're turning left to tighten. And this is what cinches everything together. So this part you can tighten right up. So you'll take your crescent wrench again, and you're going to want to get this pretty tight because we don't want the crank coming loose as you're going. You want to tighten that right up, just like that. Alright, so you're going to want to take the fork out, you're going to want to loosen the stem bolt, which is right at the top. So it's just a crescent wrench that you're going to want, and you're just going to run it along so that this gets nice and loose. And this bolt will eventually just slide right out once you get it far enough. It's not quite finger loosenable yet. So that should just pop out. Make sure to keep all the parts. Alright, so this is the part where we take the fork out and the handlebars. So what you're going to want to do is take your crescent wrench again, and you're going to thread it on and tighten it up. And basically this is turning to the left. So this is the same as turning to the lefty-loosey instead of the other way around when we did the bottom bracket. So then this is all at the top, and then this spacer you can actually loosen with your fingers, and this slides it up, and this you're going to want to take all the way to the top again. And as you go, you'll feel the fork to kind of loosen in there, which is a good sign because that means you're gaining progress there. And basically this is going to expose down in there, and you can see this is the little bearing ring. So basically what we're going to do now is take the handlebars out so we can get at the bearings. Okay, so once you've loosened off everything here, and once that stem bolt is out, what you're going to want to do is take your handlebars right out of the bike. And the easiest way to do this is to stand with your feet and your legs clenching the tire, and that's going to give you leverage to pull the handlebars either way. And some of these are old, so you're going to have to use quite a bit of muscle, but basically what you're going to want to do is slide it out of the frame there, and there it popped up. So basically that's what your handlebar looks like there. And then you can just loosen off these pieces just like this. And this is the little thread there. Oop. And then you can get at your bearings. And you can actually slide your fork right out. So this is the bearing at the bottom of the fork, and there's also one at the top of the crown. Alright, so these are the bearings at the bottom of the fork there, you can see, and there's also one in the top of the crown there. And basically what you're going to want to do is take them out and degrease them just like we did the bottom bracket, and then you can put it all back together. And when you do that, you just want to make sure that the bearing or the ball bearings are facing up. So this one faces up this way, and the other one faces the ball bearings on the bottom. So once you've cleaned everything and re-lubed everything and greased everything up, you're going to want to put it back together just the way you took it apart. So basically, you take the ring that faces the ball bearings, and you're going to want to thread it on there. And that'll spin right down. And you're just going to put it to finger tightness for now, because what we're going to do is slide the fork in, or the handlebars I should say, just like this. And then you can slide your fork all the way down to where it was before. So the last part is to slide the stem bolt all the way down. And basically you're going to tighten it all the way up. And what we used was a socket to loosen it off, so you can do the same thing with tightening it.
Okay, next we're going to take off the handlebars. So again, you'll need your hex keys or hex wrenches. This is a number 6 again. and we're just going to get in here like this, turn to the left to loosen. Loosen these all off. And once you have those out, make sure that you're keeping all of your nuts and bolts in the little parts box that you have. You should have one beside your bike stand so that you can keep track of all the different things. If it helps you, you can also put them in separate Ziploc baggies and label them with what part they are, so that you can always put the bike back together in the proper order. So there is the handlebars, and you want to take that off and give that a good clean as well. Wipe it down with a rag or something like that before you put it back together. Okay. Alright, so once you have your frame all stripped down and you've taken all the parts off and cleaned them all off, we can start putting things back together. Just be sure that any moving parts, especially the bearings, have all been cleaned and re-greased as you put your bike back together. Any spots that have a little bit of rust on them or things like that, it's always good to make sure you clean them off really well. Like we mentioned, places like your seat collar, your seat post could use a little bit of lube as you put that back in, or grease. The bearings of the bottom bracket for sure need to be greased and cleaned. And the chain, once we put the chain on, we'll show you how to give the chain a little wipe down and some lube as well. Okay, so now we're going to put the handlebars back on.
Alright, so once you get your handlebars and your stem kind of aligned, you're going to want to get it to a point where it feels comfortable on the bike, and this is just fine-tuning adjustment. But you're going to want to make sure that your handlebars are spaced evenly apart on the stem there. And then as you tighten, you're just going to want to move from bolt to bolt. Don't tighten one bolt all the way at first. You're going to want to just move from each bolt to each bolt, working your way till each one of them is tight. You're going to want to torque them pretty well, because you're not going to want your handlebars to be moving on you as you ride your bike. So you're going to torque them enough that they're really tight on there. And you're going to want to put your stem bolt back in as well. And for this one, you can kind of work it so that you get it to a point where you can't finger tighten it anymore. And then you're going to take the same tool that you used to take it off with, and you're just going to tighten it the same way that you did. And actually, depends on the size of the wrench, but sometimes it's easier to use a really small crescent wrench for this, but a big one works as well. And you're just going to want to tighten it. And again, this is a part that you want to tighten so that it's not going to be moving on you, because you don't want your stem or your fork to move as you're riding your bike. So to make sure it's real tight, just give it that last, and you can actually hold the handlebars so that you can torque it really well. And there it is.
Okay, so ideally now you've cleaned off your seat post, any rust or debris or sand or water that's in there, and given it a little coat of grease in there so that you can easily take it in and out. Now you're just going to slide this down in here, and the key is going to be finding the right height for you. Usually when you stand beside your bike, you want the seat to be about hip level. Some people, especially on these BMXs, like them to be a little bit lower, but that's kind of up to you guys how you want to do it. And then as you tighten here, remember we're using the hex key again, number 6. We're just going to tighten this up nice and tight. Again, you want this to be quite tight because you don't want your seat to be moving up and down as you're biking. Give it a nice little turn there, and that's good and solid, so that's not going anywhere, and that's that.
Alright, so once you have your tube all clear and clear of debris, you're going to want to put it back in your tire. And the easiest thing to do is work your way around the tire just by putting it in there. And once you have your tube in, you're going to want to line your valve stem up with the valve hole So you're going to want to find the valve hole on the rim, which is right there. And then you're going to want to move the tube up and into that hole. And then you just want to push it through the rim so that the valve stem comes up, and that way you can inflate your tire. And then what you're going to want to do is start from the valve stem, because it's always easier to work away, and you're just going to want to move your thumbs along the tire, and you're going to want to work your way around the rim in opposite directions. And the only reason for that is that your tire won't slip off once you get to the really hard part. So at a certain point when you get to the end, it's going to be really hard to get it up over the rim, but what you do is you just work and kind of mold your way from end to end till the rim, and the tire kind of just rolls up over the rim like that. And then you're ready to inflate your tire. Alright, so once you have your tire on your rim, you're going to want to take your floor pump, or whatever pump you have, and you're going to want to thread it onto the valve stem till it's nice and tight, so you're not going to be losing any air. And once you have it nice and tight on there, you're going to want to inflate your tire. Now the best thing to do is check your sidewall of your tire for pressure and what is the maximum inflation rate. So this one says inflate to 280 kPa or 40 psi. The max, it says, is 40 psi. So you're going to want to pump your tire up to that pressure, because that's the optimal pressure of the tire. Anything lower and you're probably going to be pushing too low of a pressure that you're going to get a flat tire, and too high is bad too, because then your ride on your bicycle is very rigid. And as you're pumping up your tire, you're going to want to periodically just stop and check that that your tube is not popping out of the sidewall. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind, because if your tube is coming out of the rim and you inflate it too much, it can pop and burst, and it makes a really loud bang, and it's not exactly a happy sound. So there you can see the needle is moving on the gauge. We're at 20 psi now, and I'm going to put it at 30 just because that's a nice rideable weight. The max was 40, and that's a good pressure. And then you're just going to want to loosen this off. And once this is off, your tire is ready to put back in the bike. Alright, so once you have your tire all inflated, you're going to want to put it back in your bike. Now the one thing to check with your tire is a rotation, and it's important to put your tire in the right way. On the front it's a little easier to mess that up because both sides are the same. You're not going to have your drivetrain isn't on one side. So on the front you're just going to want to check your tire, and you can see it says rotation and there's an arrow pointing this way. So this is the rotation of the tire. You're going to want to put it in that way so that your tread pattern is always spinning the right way. So what you're going to do, you're just going to slide it up the fork, and if your bike has these little washers on it, you're going to want to make sure that you slide the washer into the frame, and there's actually a little hole on the fork that the washer just sits in, and so that's going to sit in there just like that, and that way you can tighten the bolt so it's just on the crank like that. And the other side is exactly the same. You're going to put the washer into the hole and tighten the bolt. And I'm just doing it with my finger so that the tire stays in there until I can get the wrench. So now your tire's not going to fall out. And you're just going to want to tighten. And again, you're going to want to tighten it enough that it's not going to move on you, because you do not want your tire falling out of your bike. And then the same on the other side. You put your wrench on, and tighten it enough so that you have a good torque on it. And there you go. Alright, so when we put the chain back together, what you're going to want to do is make sure that the chain is actually off of the crank on the front, because that's going to give you freedom of movement. Your chain isn't going to be as tight, so you can freely move with it. So basically you take your rivet here, and you're going to want to line it up and push it through, just so you can feel it kind of pop into place there. And you're always going to want to be able to push the rivet through towards the bike, because working from the other side this way is really hard. So then, now you're all ready to use your chain tool. So you slide it on here, and this part is a little tricky because sometimes you have to line it up just right. But basically you get it so that it's just tight enough that you can start pushing it through. And then this one is used with a hex wrench. So you just start to push it through. And basically you should just feel it sliding through. There shouldn't be a lot of pressure going against you. And that's how you know that it's sliding through right. And you're going to want to push it into place and just feel that tightness at the very end of the rivet there. So now you've pushed it all the way through. You can kind of see it on both sides there. And when you first join it, the link is going to be a little tight. So basically what you're going to want to do is just work it back and forth with your fingers. And what I do sometimes, I laterally just push it with my thumbs on either side. And that's going to make the link nice and loose. And then it works like any other link in the chain. And then what you're going to want to do is put it on your ring at the front, and you just make a pedal stroke so that it falls into place. And your chain is on. So now we're going to want to clean the chain before you kind of put lube on it. So again, we're using a degreaser here, but soap and water works as well. So I'm just going to spray a bit onto my cloth. And then what I can do is just put what I've sprayed and rub it along the chain there. And what that's going to do is get rid of all the dust and grime, and you can see how dirty that rag is. And that's going to really clean the chain really well. You're going to want to get in between every little rivet there and make sure you're just getting rid of all that old dust and grime that's in there. And once your chain is clean, then you're ready to put lube on it. Alright, so the last step is now we're going to want to apply lube to the chain. And what we're using here is a Teflon lube again, just like the grease we used. So what this actually does is repel the dirt and grime away from the chain. So you're going to want to line it up with the back of the bike. And basically you're going to want to push out the lube, and as you do that, you're going to just pedal the bike so that you're going to get lube in every little link there. And you make a couple rotations with it. And then after you do that, just to make sure that every little bit of the lube is in the chain, you're going to take your fingers and you're just going to want to hold the chain and run it through your fingers. And that basically ensures that the lube is getting in every little spot that it can. And after you're done that, you're going to want to let it dry before you go for a ride, because all the new lube that's on there is going to attract that dust when it's freshly lubed. And the more you leave it to dry, the better it is. So leave it for overnight, and then the next day it'll be ready to ride.
Alright, so now we've taken apart the bike and put it all back together. So now you're ready to take it out and take it for a test ride. Hope you guys had a lot of fun and learned lots, and remember to be safe out there. So
and always wear a helmet. Have fun.